louder? Hello? Oh. Okay. So thanks for coming. We're going to get started. There's a couple families that aren't here yet, but we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. So we're going to invite Mr. Chris up, and he's from Christ in Action.
This can come if you want.
And we'll let him take over. Please just listen and see if you can learn about not just what they do, but why they do what they do. For all of us, but especially for the younger guys that are here, this might be something that will spark an interest in you that you might want to go, hey, I never thought of doing that when I'm a little older or whatever. So this might be something for you to consider. And he'll explain more about that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Might have to take me down a bit. I think you took the main up. Keep coming down. All right, is that better? There we go. All right, well, good morning. How's everybody? Good. Is there anybody from my family that wants to come up? Come on. Come on. My family is here with me. Come on up, guys. I got all but one, and that's okay. So this is my wife, Bethany.
Good morning.
And
This is
Anna,
How old are you, Anna?
6.
And what's your name?
Luke,
And how old are you, Luke?
4.
4. And this guy behind me is Joel, and he is 5. And then Peyton is in the back. Can you stand up and wave, buddy? He is 8.
And I don't know if you know this, but we are a homeschool family too. So could we be part of your group today? Is that okay? All right, good. Well, thank you guys for coming. Is there anybody that wants to talk a little bit about what we do? Maybe not? Well, you'll hear a little from Peyton on the screen in a little bit, and we'll share what that looks like, all right? Can you guys give them a hand? So I've got some questions for you. Is there anybody that likes to answer questions? Yeah? All right. Well, my first question for you is, what is a missionary? What's a missionary?
People that go around the world and tell people about Jesus.
Very good. Guys, give him a hand. You got an answer for that, Luke? Okay, well, we know what he thinks about that. So, again, this is our family. This is Peyton. This is Anna. This is Joel. And this is Luke. And this was on their first day of school this year. But we weren't home where we normally live. We were out serving as missionaries. And so, what is a missionary? And that was a great answer. It's someone who leaves their home to tell others about Jesus so that they will have an eternal home in heaven. And that's what a missionary is. So what kinds of missionaries are there? There's people that they might learn a trade or a skill or a certain job, like being a doctor. So that, or what?
Or language.
Language. Yes, you skipped ahead of me, son. Maybe they want to become a teacher so that they can go and teach others. Maybe it is someone that learns another religion or another language so that they can go and leave their home and go somewhere else and tell people about Jesus so that those people can have an eternal home in heaven. Maybe there's others that would want to provide a service. Maybe like a homeless shelter for people that don't have a home, or a food pantry so that people that don't have food can get the food that they need. Or maybe like us, disaster relief. So Peyton, what is disaster relief?
Disaster relief is when you clean out
do muck outs, gut outs, or demos.
Okay. So let's start with, what is a disaster? Anybody? What's a disaster? You can put your hand up. Yes, sir.
It's when something happens bad.
Something happens bad. That is pretty much it. Something that happens bad. It could be like a tornado. Have you ever heard of a tornado? A big funnel cloud that really, he's like, yeah, I like tornadoes. Well, but they cause a lot of damage, right? And some people, they don't have a home after a tornado comes through. It could be a flood. We just got back from serving in Southwest Virginia and from Kentucky, where there were so many people that had their houses flooded, and they didn't have a place to live. And so when disasters happen, they need not just a home to sleep in, but some of them don't know Jesus. And so we want to go and help tell them about Jesus. So what is a missionary? It's somebody that leaves their home to go and share about Jesus so that those people will have an eternal home in heaven. So we are disaster relief missionaries, and so when all that destruction happens, we go and we find a local church and we partner with them, and then we go in and we help people clean up so that we can get to talk with them about Jesus. So here's Peyton's version of what is disaster relief.
We help people, and basically we go to a town outside the affected area, and then we start looking for a church that will host us. Then for about maybe 2 weeks or 3, we go and help people, and once we're done, we tell them about God's love. Sometimes they offer us money, but we don't take it. We're a non-profit ministry.
Why do we do what we do?
Because we want to share the love of God.
So what does being a disaster relief missionary look like? How many of you like trucks? Is there anybody in here that likes trucks? Okay, we got a couple. What about excavators? Anybody like excavators and bulldozers? Oh, I see smiles. What about you? Do you like excavators? Yeah. What about big semi-trucks? Big semi-trucks or car carriers. Do you like those? What's your favorite?
I like all of those.
All of them. Well, we have all of those. And those are some of the tools that we use. So let's look at some of them. That's one of our semi-trucks, and it's pulling a kitchen. Yeah. Imagine if your kitchen was on a trailer and you had to drive it all over the place. That's what that is. And so when we have volunteers that come to serve with us and be missionaries with us, we got to eat. And we're gone. We're away from home for months at a time. Yeah. And so we take a kitchen with us so that we can cook and we can eat. So that's our mobile kitchen, and that's inside of it. And there's a big stove, and there's 3 big sinks, and there's big griddles that we can make pancakes on. How many of you like pancakes? All right. And there's also big ovens that we can use, and so that's how we eat when we're away from home. What you got? Good job. That says CIA. Oh, good. CIA. What does CIA stand for? You forgot?
Christ in action.
Christ in action, right? So when a tornado comes through or a hurricane, there's a lot of wind, and so there's a lot of trees that go down. Yeah, what would you put in there? Okay. But there's a lot of trees that blow down, and people's yards are a mess. And so we get to go in and we help them clean up their properties. Sometimes their whole house gets flooded, and so their refrigerators don't work anymore, and their stoves don't work anymore, and they have to take all of this stuff out of the house, and so we get to help them do it. That was somebody's house where somebody lived. That was their living room. And so when water comes in, we've got to take all the furniture out, we've got to take all the carpet out, and we've even got to take the walls out, because when that water gets trapped in there, there's no way for it to get out. And if we don't take that stuff out, it's going to get stinky and moldy and not safe. And so it's called gutting. That's right. That's exactly what that's called. And so we have volunteers that come, 18 years old or older, and they come and they serve with us so that we can help people. And sometimes the trees fall on the house. Look at that. And so we can't just go in there and start working. We've got to get that tree off of there. And so we have excavators and chainsaws that come in, and we can cut the tree up, and we can take it off of their house so that they can start putting their house back together. So look at that excavator. How about that? Right? You like that? So sometimes their house is too damaged. And sometimes we actually have to take the whole house down. And it sounds like a weird way to bring hope, but it's one way that we can help them and save them tens of thousands of dollars. Because we're volunteering. We're working for them for free so that they can use the money that they have to rebuild their house or repair their house. So there's one of our track loaders, and that semi-trailer, could anybody guess what that is? Restrooms, almost. Showers. Somebody could see that is a shower trailer. And so how many showers do you have in your house? One, two, okay, that's normal, right? In that trailer, there's 12. 12 showers. And guess how much water that trailer can hold? 1,000 gallons. You know what a gallon of milk looks like, right? Imagine 1,000 gallons. That's how much water can hold. And we can do 800 hot showers in one day if we need to. And so that's not just for our volunteers that go, but some of the people that lost their houses, they need a place to shower. And so we can provide that to the community that's trying to recover from a disaster. But the real reason why we're there is so that we can pray for them and encourage them and come alongside of them to help them through this time. And if they don't know Jesus, we want to get them to know him and to get them connected to a local church if they're not already connected. So that's what it looks like for us as disaster relief missionaries. So what does it look like for our family? So that's kind of what Christ in Action as an organization does. But what about our family? What does that look like? So this is where we live when we're gone away from home. And it is an RV, and so this is our home away from home. And so we just got done living in it for 2 months, and we're about ready to live in it again for another couple months because we are getting ready to go down and serve for Hurricane Ian. Have anybody heard about Hurricane Ian that hit Florida? Right? A lot of people that lost their homes and need this kind of help. So sometimes that means that we're gone away from home for a long time, and sometimes even over holidays and birthdays. So somebody had a birthday while we were gone just this last month. Does anybody tell me who it might be? Peyton. Peyton turned 8 while we were gone. So we live in an RV instead of a house while we're gone, and we're gone for months at a time. And sometimes that's over those kind of special days. But we get to meet a lot of amazing people that volunteer with us. The kids get to make new friends wherever we go. And we just get to serve with some of the most amazing people. That also means that we are homeschooling while we're gone. And so that can be a challenge because we don't have desks where we go. So we have a little portable table that we set up. Sometimes we can use some of the space at the church where we're set up. And sometimes it's just bouncing down the road in the RV doing homeschool. But the kids are doing really well. And Peyton, did you have anything you wanted to share about homeschool? You want to come up here? Okay, sorry. But we get to travel across the country, and we get to see some amazing things. So sometimes recess looks like climbing a rock wall, right? Who is that? Was that you, Joel? Yeah, it looks like Joel. Or back behind the church where we parked the RV, there was a creek there, and so it had a little nature lesson, right? That was fun. But we get to learn in unique ways. But like I said, we're getting ready. So after we leave here, part of what we do also, in addition to disaster relief, is we also do training. And so we teach people, how do you talk to somebody who just lost their house? Or just, maybe they had a death in the family. Maybe they just lost their dad. And so we teach people, how do you talk to someone that's going through a disaster or going through a crisis? And so we're going to do that training tomorrow and Saturday over at the Worship Center in Lancaster. And then we'll drive to Texas, where we're doing another training just like that. And then we'll be going to Florida to help the people from Hurricane Ian. So that is what our plan looks like until it changes. But what does it mean, and how does our family serve as missionaries? So listen to Peyton talk about that. Deployment.
I like that I can help grind coffee and make it, and I like it because I get to help in the kitchen a lot, and my brothers and sisters do lunch runs, and I helped mop the gym in Kentucky.
So even though Peyton is 8 and we've got ages all the way down to 4, there's still stuff that they can do to help. And so you heard Peyton talk about helping in the kitchen and making coffee as I think his favorite thing on deployment. Is that right? Maybe? Yeah. Just helping to carry things. There's Anna making some coffee in the morning because, man, it takes a lot of energy to go out and do all that work. There's Joel mopping the floor. Good job, Joel. And there's Luke helping with the laundry, because you still got to do laundry. You don't get away from that, even when you leave home. And helping cleaning, too. So it's a lot of work, and you are tired by the end of the day, so don't miss your nap, okay? That's important. Yeah. You take naps? You don't like naps? Well, we like naps. We like naps for you. Oh, and every once in a while we get a surprise in the mail from a grandparent or friends that are thinking about us and praying for us and supporting us while we're gone. So, why do we spend all this time away from home? It's not easy. So let's hear from Peyton. Worth it.
It's hard being away from home, but first, I like it, and I don't think about home much, and then I start to miss home, but it's worth it because more people get to go to heaven and not hell, and so that we can see more people in heaven, so that more people will become part of God's family.
And that's why we do it. It's not because it's easy. It's not always fun. But it is important, and it's something that God has called us to. And so that's why we have spent the last number of years. So Bethany started with Christ in Action in 2001, full-time as a missionary. She was, some of you younger ones don't remember 9/11, but when we had the terrorist attacks at the Pentagon and then up in New York City, she was on the Pentagon parking lot, cooking and serving breakfast. So 5,000 hot breakfasts by 7 a.m. every morning. And so we used one of our mobile kitchens to do that, and then went up to New York City to do the same thing. So that was when she started full-time, and then I started full-time in 2010. So it's been a couple years, and she's gotten to meet President George W. Bush while Christ in Action was deployed to Hurricane Katrina, and just a lot of stories of people that we've been able to help and bring hope to. And so our mission is to bring hope to America's families. Does anybody know what hope is? What is hope?
Hope is when you want something and you think you might get it, or
Yeah. Hope is when you want something and you think you might get it. And the hope that we want to bring to people is the hope of Jesus. And so, we can't always fix everything that they want us to fix because their house is so broken. But we're able to bring the hope of Jesus to them, that he can walk through this with them, and that right then we're there for them too. So that's how we are missionaries. But how about you guys? How could you be a missionary? Does anybody have any ideas? We got one back here.
By helping people.
By helping people. Yeah, by serving, just like we do. Right? And then while you're serving them, you can get to talk to them about what you believe about Jesus. That's really good. Does anybody else have an idea? Peyton.
physical needs first, spiritual second.
Physical needs first and spiritual needs second. So let's think about that. What does that mean? Well, when Jesus was here, do you remember the stories about how Jesus fed the 5,000? Well, he fed the 5,000. That's meeting a physical need because our bodies need food, right? And then after that, he taught them. He taught them about the kingdom of heaven, and he taught them about God. And so those are spiritual needs. And so that's the same pattern, or as Luke would say, pattern, that we follow. We follow what Jesus did, and we help them physically, but we also help them spiritually. Yes, dear?
Praying for them.
Praying for them. That's so good. That was one of mine, was praying for missionaries. That is so important because there's so many things that happen. And sometimes we get sick, and sometimes we have trouble with our vehicles and our equipment. And sometimes we just get tired. And so we need those prayers as missionaries. So yeah, praying for them is a huge one. But yeah, talking to your friends, praying for missionaries, and also supporting missionaries or giving to missionaries. And those are all ways that you can support missionaries and be a missionary. So I got to talk to a group of students much like you a couple years ago, and they were going to the school that I went to when I was your age. And what they did was, a month or two later, they had collected some money and they bought a piece of equipment that we still use to this day on deployment to help people. And so those are all ways. Don't feel like, oh, well, God hasn't called me to be a full-time missionary and leave my home, so there's nothing I can do. Oh, there's a lot that you can do. And so those are great ways for you to be a missionary. Does anybody have any questions before there's still more that I want to talk about, but any questions up to this point? And then we'll have more time for questions at the end. Yes, Miss Michelle.
How does, you were talking about homeschooling on the road, how does homeschooling work when you're serving? Because homeschooling is huge, but serving is huge. So there's probably a lot of juggling that goes on. So explain that a little bit.
Yes, explain that a little bit. Come on up here so people can see you.
So we homeschool. Right now we have 3. We have a 4th grader, a 2nd grader, and a kindergartner. And it is like she said, it's a juggling act, especially because right now I'm running the kitchen, and so I am responsible for preparing 3 meals a day for the entire team, which varies anywhere from 25 people to 70 people, and so it's a lot to juggle as far as making sure the kids still get an education, but also making space for them to engage and to serve and to make the coffee in the morning and help cleaning and doing. I think Peyton mentioned the lunch runs where we deliver lunches out to the teams that are working, and so making space for that, and also making sure they still do their school, and we meet all of our requirements. And so typically what that looks like for us is we don't do school in the mornings. We don't start school until after lunchtime. And so in the mornings they work, they help, they serve, and then after we do the lunch run, then Luke still takes a nap, and so he goes down for naps, and I have a break in the kitchen in the afternoon. And so normally I'll have a volunteer or two that I'll say, here, chop these vegetables, prep this, do that, and have them work in the kitchen doing prep work while I spend a couple hours with the kids in the afternoon doing school, and then I'll go back in about 4 o'clock to actually put dinner together. And so yeah, it's a lot of juggling, and some days if it's a busy day in the kitchen or I don't have an extra volunteer, Chris will cut some time out of his schedule and he'll take over school for the day. But it is, people say that if you're flexible, then you're not easily bent out of shape. For us, we take it a step further and we call it fluid, because things change really, really quickly on a deployment. And so what's the plan in the morning may not be the same plan by lunchtime. And so there's a lot of fluidity in what we do. But we do have benchmarks for the kids, as far as, okay, maybe one day we don't do school, maybe it's just a day where everybody's serving all day long, and then the next day we'll double up on school, or, we'll have school on a Saturday instead of on a Monday, or, whatever. So it looks different just depending on the day, but we do have a pretty good pattern that we found works for us in the midst of a deployment.
Do it from back there. Good question, Miss Michelle. Does any of my kids want to talk about school? Any other questions before we continue? All right. Well, think about more questions. So, how many 7-year-olds do we have here? Raise your hand if you're 7. 2. Oh, 3. 3? They're not 7? Okay. 1? Am I down to 1? No 7-year-olds? Okay, we got 1. Okay. Well, would you imagine if your house had water in it? Like, not just bathtub water. Like, you walk down the steps and you were up to here in water, up to your waist, and you could hardly get out the door. How scary would that be, right? So I want you to hear from a 7-year-old that I got to meet while we were deployed in Colorado after they had lots of flooding. And his house got flooded. They were able to repair it, but I think you'll enjoy hearing it from his perspective. So this is my friend Bodie.
My name is Bodie, and I am 7. I'm here to tell you about the flood. I don't know why my dad woke me up the first place. So he woke me up. He said there's a flood in the front yard. And I'm like, really? And he just gets me out of bed. We took a Jeep, and right when we were about to hit the road, we started floating down. This is Aria, my little sister. She in the back of the car was saying to Mom, "I'm holding on, Mom, I'm holding on." I thought it was awesome until my mom said, "Bodie, this is not awesome." But instead I said, "This is a great experience though." And we all went up to Rattlesnake Ridge, which is over this house, and we peered down to the house. There was a bunch of white water in our front yard. It's so cool how the river jumped the little curve and came rushing through our front yard. I was just thinking that's sort of cool, of the force of nature. Well, I had a peek at the classroom. It had water in it, and I had a peek in my mom's bedroom, and it had water in it. The play structure got destroyed. So we took a couple shovels to get some muck out.
They digged out my playhouse.
Yeah.
They saved it?
Uh-huh.
Did they save the kitchen in there too?
Mm-hmm.
They did? Are you happy about that?
Thank you for helping our house.
What do you think about that? Amazing, right? Woo. You can clap if you want. But we got to go in and we got to help Bodie and his family just clean up and get them to the point where they were ready to start repairing their house. And so you saw some of the equipment in there. That picture, that where all the dirt was and there was a big, like a canyon carved out, that was his front yard. The water had normally, the little river was in the back of the house. But he talked about how the river jumped over the bank and came around the front yard. That's how much water was around Bodie's house. And so we were there and we were able to help them. And while we were helping, one of our volunteers found a little ornament from Bodie's. It was for Bodie's dad. And Bodie's dad didn't know Jesus. And so Bodie's dad unwrapped this ornament, and it was his grandmother who was a Christian. And God used that to remind him of who Jesus is and who, just the hope that was there. And when we put this video up online, we got a phone call from Parker's aunt, from Bodie's great aunt. And she said, "You don't know how long we've been praying for Bodie and his family. And you guys were an answer to our prayers because it was so evident why we were there. We were there to represent Jesus and to bring hope to Bodie and his family." So that's about Christ in action. That's about our family and what it looks like to be a missionary, to be a disaster relief missionary. And so for those of you that are interested in more information, we have these brochures up here that you're welcome to take. And then I mentioned the training that we're going to do at the worship center tomorrow and Saturday. And so I'm probably a little late to take off of work tomorrow. But those information about that is here. We can talk to you about that afterward. But we are online, of course, and so for you adults and teens that want to learn more, you can look us up there. So it's time for questions. Yes, we got a mic coming.
So how do you guys know where to go, and
Good
whose
question.
houses you go to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first off, let's talk about from a disaster perspective, and then we'll talk about the individuals. So when a big disaster happens, and when I say big, that means it has to be overwhelming to the local people and the local responders. So most of the times, fire trucks and police cars, and they can take care of a lot of the things that happen in your neighborhood. But when it gets to the point where they can't and it's overwhelming for them, that's when Christ in Action will look at, man, is this something that we should respond to? And so depending on how far away it is from Virginia, because we live in Virginia, we will go out and we'll look and we'll drive out there and we'll look at what is the damage and are there things that we can help people with? Because if people just need their driveway fixed, that's not something that we can help them with. But if they need a tree taken off of their house or if they got water in their house, that's stuff that we can help with. And so we've got to know that if we go, that there's enough needs that we can meet. And so that's why we don't go to every storm. And we can't. We're only one organization with 4 full-time missionary staff families. And so we can't go every time. But when God leads us to go and we find a church that we can set up at and partner with, then we'll go and we'll deploy. Once we get there, the question was, how do we know which families to help? Because a lot of times there is so much need and you don't know where to start. And so often we'll start with, if the church has a list of people that either attend there or are connected to the church, we'll start there and we'll start calling and reaching out to them and saying, were you able to get the help that you needed yet? And what kind of help do you need? And so after we reach out to them, we'll set up a time where we'll meet them at their house and we'll see what the damage is and we'll see if it's stuff that we can help with. And how many volunteers are we going to need to send to help them at their house? And how many trucks are we going to need? And how many pieces of equipment are we going to need? How many chainsaws and that kind of thing? And so we'll look at that and we'll pray with them then and figure out, well, are you connected with a church? Do you know Jesus? And ask them those kind of questions so that we can figure out what are the best ways that we can help them. And so sometimes we get so many requests that we have to figure out, well, who do we help first? And so sometimes that's dependent on if they're elderly or if they're disabled or what type of damage they had. Because for people that had a tree on their house, we want to get that tree off as soon as we can so that they can get their roof covered so that no more rain gets in and causes further damage. But there's sometimes with the houses that need to come all the way down, like they were so damaged that we can leave that until later. Because if rain gets in there, it's not going to matter because they're not going to try to repair that house. So that's kind of how that works. Yes, another question back here.
What happens when you guys is to wait? What happens when you guys is wait?
When we have to wait?
When we're later, when we like this deployment.
Yeah. So there's sometimes where we can't get there right away. And so that often can actually be, that's an okay thing, because with the big disasters, there are other organizations that are similar to Christ in Action that they might be able to get there right away, but they might only be able to stay there for 2 or 3 weeks. And so we work really well together with other organizations Some of them are faith-based, like we are. Some of them are not. But either way, we're able to work with them, and sometimes when we get there a little later, that means we could stay a little longer. And so when some of the other groups are getting ready to leave because they've gotten to the end of the work that they can do, we're able to pick up where they left off and carry that even further. That's a good question. Another question.
So it sounds like you do this full time.
Yes.
So let's say my husband and I want to do this, but
Yes.
we can only do it part time, because Michelle was saying maybe to the younger ones,
Yeah.
if this is something they would be interested in. So how do
Yeah.
you get started, and can you kind of
Sure.
pick and choose what you want to do?
Okay. So let's talk about just volunteering first, because we have plenty of people that they'll just take a couple days off of work or a week or two, and they'll want to come and volunteer with us. And so the way it works is we have an email list. So I'd say if you want to get connected with us, we can put a sheet out in the back to give us your email address. And when we have opportunities like this for Hurricane Ian, probably later today or tomorrow, we'll be sending an email out saying, hey, we need volunteers to come and serve with us. And we'll give you the general area of where we're going to be. And then if you're 18 or older, you can sign up and tell us, I can come this day and I can stay until this day. And then you're responsible to get yourself to where we are. We call that Camp Hope, is where we set up, wherever we set up that church. We call it Camp Hope. And so you're responsible to get yourselves to and from Camp Hope. But once you get there, we have floor space on a church just like this. You bring a single-size cot or single-size air mattress. We have men sleeping in one area, women sleeping in another area. And then we will make sure we have enough food. We'll feed you 3 hot meals and provide lots of work. And so, but if you're coming and you have some physical limitations, we just ask that you be upfront with us about that so that you don't work beyond what you can do, but you will be stretched, right? Because that's part of missions work, is God uses that to stretch us and to teach us things about ourselves and about others, even while we're serving. So, if you want to volunteer, that's the way to do it. And see what it's like. I wouldn't recommend, unless you hear a voice from God, don't jump right in and say, hey, I'm leaving everything and going to be a disaster relief missionary. You need to experience it first and see what it's like. And so if you feel like that's something that God might be calling you to, come and volunteer and come to a training, because you get to hear more about what that's like and how it works to work with people in crisis all day long. But if you're in that boat, come and volunteer and then talk to us about, we have some people that are part-time missionary staff. And so they're not with us full-time, but they still raise missionary support. And that way, when a disaster happens, they can deploy and they can take that time away from work or whatever their income is, how that works. So, and we are praying and looking and believing God to provide more people to add to our team, whether that's volunteer, part-time staff, full-time staff, all of the above. So we need more people so that we can reach more people, because there's always too much work to be done. So one up here and one back there. Did you have a question? A fire?
We have responded to fires before, wildfires in California, and it's a different type of deployment because typically there's not a whole lot you can do. And for the first time when we went there, we had to buy sifters, and we literally just sat there and sifted through the ashes with people looking for things that they had lost in the fire. And so a lot of times a fire is a huge disaster, but until you get to the rebuilding phase, there's not a whole lot you can do because there's nothing left most of the time. But yeah, that's a good one.
This is a weird question, but what's the deepest water that you guys have ever got in a house?
I think probably the deepest water we've ever seen is when it's over the roof of a house, like a second-story home. So after Hurricane Katrina, especially in Louisiana, in Mississippi, it was mostly wind damage, but in Louisiana, it was flooding. And there were homes where you couldn't even see the top of the home for almost a month. The water just stayed there. And it is the worst flooding I've ever seen. And so I would say probably about 20 feet deep.
Right? That's crazy. That wasn't a weird question.
No, it's a good question.
But that wasn't as bad as the tsunami, earthquake, volcano, and flooding in Japan in the late 1900s.
Well, there you go.
Yes.
He's hosting a class after school.
So I have two questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so you asked what was a missionary? And you kind of like challenged us as missionaries here. And so thinking outside of the box of, you said like the definition basically that was given to us is you minister to the physical needs first, then the spiritual. But when we're living in our Jerusalem, our Judea, our Samaria, and when we're living in that time, in that area, there might not be a physical need that's needed.
Sure.
Okay, think of your neighbors. I tell my neighbors all the time, if you need anything, let us know. But typically, there's not like a definite need. But that doesn't mean that we're not a missionary to those people. And so I think in that context, I think missionary means how can you just take the light of Christ to them?
Yeah.
By just being there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just have to be that light without without a need being there, And so I just want to encourage the kids that you can be a missionary. One thing I told my daughter, even when she was really little, is, honey, you know what? When you go through the grocery store line and that cashier seems really stressed or upset, a smile will probably, make their day 100 times better.
Yeah.
It'll just help them get through the rest of their work time, maybe. They'll remember that little kid with a smile. And so I think that's also being a missionary, even though we're not actively, doing, we're not preaching the gospel and we're also not meeting a need. We're just kind of smiling and loving. Yeah. And so that, I think, is part of that. The other thing was you spoke about if you want to come and volunteer or if you want to be a part of it, getting the missionary support.
Yeah.
So does that work the same as like any other missionary where you have to get your support up for the year or whatever? So do you accept donations then, was my question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit? Yeah.
You want to talk about?
Come on. So we do. So when we have families that are interested and feel like God's calling them to be full-time missionaries or even part-time and that raising support, what that raising support means is, a lot of times your parents have a job of some kind, right? And so they'll go and they'll work during the day so that they have enough money to buy food, right? To pay for the house that you live in, to buy gas for the car that you drive, and all of those things cost money, right? And Peyton also likes to talk about economics too. But all of those things cost money. And so when you are a missionary, like I said earlier, a lot of times we're leaving home very quickly. And so imagine if your dad or mom who works would go to their boss and say, I have to leave tomorrow. I'm not sure when I'm going to be back, but I'll let you know. It might be a month, it might be 2 months, but see you later. How do you think that would work? That's not going to work, because that boss needs your parent to do those jobs, right? And so one of the ways that we can make sure that we're ready to go as soon as we need to go is by raising support and by asking our friends and our family, our church, man, would you give money so that we can go and be missionaries? And so Bethany and I don't work a regular job. There's still a lot of work to be done, and it is full-time work. But we're able to do that so that the donations that come in to buy the equipment and to maintain it and to fix it when it's broken and to put fuel in those trucks and in that equipment that's doing that work and to buy the food that's feeding the volunteers, the money that people give for that, it doesn't go to pay any person like in a normal business. It goes for the mission. And so that way, we don't get money from the people that give to Christ in Action. The money that we use to buy our food and to put gas in our car comes from the people that support us as missionaries. And so, yeah, that's what we do. We walk our staff that's raising support. We talk to them about, well, here are some good ideas and some good ways to talk to the people that you're meeting about the work that we do and about, man, this is how God called us to do that, and this is what he's called us to do. And so would you support us financially so that we can do the work that God's called us to do? And you see that example in the Bible, in the New Testament, and even when you look at how in the Old Testament, where the priests and the Levites, right, they were full-time dedicated to certain work that God had for them. And so there were others that supported them based on what they were raising, the money that they had and the food that they grew. Did I get all of that, Bethany? Other questions? Any questions about the equipment? Or we have on our fleet, so our big collection of trucks, we have about 28 trucks and about 38 trailers. So it takes a lot of money to get everything where it needs to be. And so right now while we're sitting here, our team back in Virginia is getting all this equipment ready to roll to Florida for the hurricane relief.
Which means we also need volunteer drivers. If you heard him say we have 4 staff families, that's a max of 8 people who can actually drive on our staff. And we have 20-odd vehicles that we need to transport. And so we are always looking for CDL drivers and people who have experience with, a pickup truck and trailer who can help us just drive it to where we're going so that we can get the equipment on site.
And so that's part of what I've been working on the way driving here is calling our volunteer drivers that have helped us in the past and say, hey, we're leaving Tuesday. Can you take a couple days and help us drive to Florida? And so if you know somebody like Randy Geisler or somebody that could come and help us, we need the help.
My question is, what would be your average number of people that you help? Like how many families?
Yeah. It varies based on the kind of work because it takes about, 3 times as long to do the gutting work that we saw, like the pictures with the insulation and the walls coming out. It takes like 2 or 3 times as long to do that kind of project than it would to take a whole house down. So, but for example, we spent 5 weeks in Kentucky just recently for the flooding there, and in those 5 weeks we were able to serve 56 families. We had about 65 volunteers, I believe, and that ended up being about 4,000 volunteer hours, so man-hour wise. But in in Kentucky for the tornado where we were at the beginning of the year, we ended up serving 230 families. Well, we were there for
7 weeks.
7 weeks. And it was smaller projects. Question there and question there.
So can you just break it down for us? Like, you get the call to come, and you go, okay, we're coming. You get in your trucks and you go, like you're going to go to Florida. What do you do? Like, how close do you get?
Sure.
Like, where are you parked with all those vehicles? Like, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So when we get a call, the first thing that we'll do is we won't just start rolling equipment right away. So we do what's called an assessment first. And so I just got back from Florida, flew back 2 days ago, and we always go and, again, put our eyes on what is the damage, where is the damage, what kind of damage, so that we know even what to bring down from Virginia. So we're connecting with local pastors, churches that we have relationships with, community leaders, local government, and emergency services, so that we can have a better idea of what's where, and then identifying where is this church that we're going to partner with. Because we always partner with a local church, whether we're doing a training or whether we're doing a disaster relief deployment, because we're only going to be there for a month or two. But the church is going to be there for the long haul. And so we can't, the Bible says, Jesus said to go and make disciples. And we aren't able to provide discipleship to all the people that we reach. But the local churches are able to do that. And so that's why we always partner with a local church. And so once we get the assessment done and we figured out where is the biggest need and what kind of work and how much equipment are we going to need and how much space is available at the church, that will dictate everything else. And so, for example, when we were deployed for the flooding in Southwest Virginia earlier, about 2 months ago, that church didn't have space for us to sleep volunteers. And so we were just there with our core team, so that was about 20 people, and we had about 6 campers that our team was sleeping in. We were cooking and eating in the church because they did have space for that. And then we had our big semi-tool trailer, and we had our tool trucks with little trailers to haul that equipment on with the excavators and the skid loaders. And so it was set up at the church. It's parked at the church. Well, that's cute. It was parked there at the church on their property, in the parking lot. And so imagine, like, if we were set up here, we would need to take, half to 2/3 of the parking lot, and we squeeze it in as much as we can, and we got to figure out how we're going to get power to it all and how we're going to get water to the kitchen and the showers and all of that, so that everything can function for a couple months. And so that's kind of what that looks like. And so right after we determine what we need to take, so I'm working out what trucks and pulling what trailers and who's a qualified driver that can drive that, and how are we going to kind of organize all this so that we can get down, and how long is it going to take us to get down there? So to Florida from Virginia, it's a 2-day drive. And so, well, then that means we got to figure out a place to sleep on the way down, and when we get there, where are we going to set up what piece of equipment? And so it's a lot of logistics, a lot of planning, and a lot of moving parts. But that's part of what Bethany and I get to do as part of the leadership, is figuring all that out before we get down there, so that we've got some kind of a plan and can do our best to make it happen. Question?
What happens when stuff like this hurt?
What happens when stuff like this hurts?
When somebody gets hurt.
When somebody gets hurt. Got it. So we will, we have first aid kits along with every team, for one. And then also, as volunteers come, we ask them if they have any medical training so that we're aware and can, if there's immediate needs, critical needs that happen. But if, depending on how bad, if they need to go get to the urgent care, get to the doctor to take care, maybe they've got, scraped with a nail, or we had some people step on nails. And so part of what we tell our volunteers is you need to come prepared. You can't go on a disaster site wearing shorts and flip-flops. It doesn't work. You're going to get hurt. And so part of what we have to do is educate our volunteers to say, here's what you need to bring. You need to bring good work boots, so that it would take quite a nail to get all the way up through that. You need to come and you need to wear long pants every day, even if it's really hot outside, because we're more concerned about keeping you safe than we are about keeping you comfortable. And so long pants are required. Whenever we go out, you saw in the pictures, we're all wearing red shirts so that people are easily seen, so that you don't accidentally knock into somebody. We encourage them to watch out for each other and work safely. Wear work gloves and wear eye protection and earplugs if you need to. Wear masks if you're working in a flooded home, because there's stinky stuff in there that could hurt you if you breathe it in. And so those are all safety things. When we bring lunch out, we bring a hand washing station and make sure that we're preparing the food safely to keep people from getting sick and keep people from getting hurt. Good question. Anybody else?
I was just going to tack on to that. Typically, anyone who is injured in the disaster, by the time we get there, have already had their emergency medical care, because there are people who have serious injuries after a flood or a tornado or something like that. But by the time we arrive, it's been a couple of days at least, and so they've already had that emergency medical care.
Yeah, and so people that maybe they were trapped in their house with a flood or with this hurricane, and so even often before we get there, they have already, the emergency responders, like people that do what they call search and rescue, they are wrapping up or have wrapped up that phase of a disaster. And so they've been able to get everybody out that they were able to get out and rescue them, so that when we come in, we're able to start what's called the relief phase of a disaster. And so that's where they're not worried about keeping people alive and safe, but now they're starting to focus on the property and the infrastructure damage, like damage to roads and damage to power lines, damage to the water supply, damage to the sewer system. And so they have areas in Florida right now that they're not expected to get power back for several more weeks. And it's already been 2 or 3 weeks since the disaster happened. So when you're going out to these places, they don't have power for you to plug in your cell phone, and they're not able to cook meals for themselves. And so whether it's Christ in Action or another group, they're often cooking meals for people that still need food because they're not able to cook for themselves. Another question up here.
And maybe you answered this question. So
Yeah.
let's say like our neighborhood gets wiped out by a flood or hurricane. Do you get to have a personal relationship or interaction with each family? So let's say we all were at a shelter somewhere and being taken care of our family, but our house is obviously demolished.
Yeah.
Do you get to have a personal relationship with everyone, or is it kind of hit or miss? Like take a whole area?
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So when something like that happens, if you're being sheltered or something like that, we will, however you contact us to say, hey, I need help with my home, we will set up a time to come out and meet with you at your home. And we do that for 2 main reasons. Part of it is so that we can talk with you and make sure that when you say, oh, just take out all the walls, that we know which walls you're talking about. And we're not, you don't show up at your house and you're like, wait, you demoed my house? I just wanted you to take out the furniture. Like we don't want any miscommunications. And so that's part of it, is a very practical thing. So, and then also so that if you say, oh, just take out the furniture, and we look and see mold growing up the walls, we can say, well, we'll take out the furniture, but do you realize that this mold growing up your walls is going to make you sick? And so part of that is an education piece as well, to make sure that you're getting the help you need and you understand the risks of not taking that moldy drywall out of your home. But then the second reason is so that we have a chance to meet with you personally, to talk with you, not just how is your house doing and how can we help you there, but how are you holding up? You have been through a traumatic experience. And whether you are doing great and just thanking God that you're alive, or you feel like your world is coming to an end, we want to be there and pray for you, support you, help you find your next steps. And so that's the other piece of it, is that meeting with you there at your property gives us a chance to connect with you personally and minister to you directly. And so, yeah, everybody that we help, we always meet with them personally, typically at their home site. Sometimes if for whatever reason they can't get there, we'll meet at a neutral location. But we always meet with the homeowners personally and get a chance to pray with them and minister to them individually.
Yeah, because that's the real reason we're there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and so we also have chaplains, and Randy, who I keep referring, who attends here, he's one of our chaplains. And so part of our training, we have chaplains that'll come and serve with us on deployment or even in their local communities. And so there have been times right here in Lancaster where you guys have had flooding. And so we've been able to help with that as Christ in Action and some of our local connections here to deploy here. And I do have another video I could pull up about that too. Other questions? Think about it while I pull up this other video. Does anybody here like videos? Yes. All right. All right, so this was flooding back in Lancaster in about 2011.
My name is Daryl Stolzfus, and I have been working with Christ in Action for over 15 years. I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and we had the tropical storm come through.
Our trailer was underwater, and we are slowly losing our home. Yeah. And when we walked out, it was about waist high.
So there were a lot of needs, and it's very difficult because people just look at the street and everybody's going by and life looks normal, but for them it was just turned upside down and some of them just lost everything. There's a couple of them that there's no reason to go into these trailers because they're condemned and they're not livable. But most of them, when they came back on Friday, they were excited because their mobile home was still here and even the inside floors were not wet. But then they found out that some of them were starting to get spongy, and here with mobile homes, the insulation is outside underneath. They're not realizing that they're waterlogged.
And I don't think we realized how much we lost until maybe the next day is when it started sinking in.
And so now reality is setting in and mold is starting to set in. And so what we're doing right now is taking the insulation and pulling all the insulation out of underneath these mobile homes, hopefully catching it before the mold is set in, letting them air out, hopefully, and most of them put the insulation back in where they can keep the homes that they have. Other ones will not be able to because even the floors are starting to get moldy at this point. The volunteer base has been overwhelming. We made an announcement at church last week, and people are just going where they need to go.
And then there's people like you guys that we don't know that have no reason to come in and help, but you do anyway.
One couple really needed help with insulation and also some items in a storage barn. Tried to communicate with them and realized that both of them are deaf. So it was a little bit of a challenge, and we write things down and try to communicate back and forth in that way, they were just blessed. I mean, they didn't really know how to communicate. They felt overwhelmed with everything that was going on. And we were at least able to write down and be able to do some of that and help them out. And they were very thankful that somebody took the time to do that.
Anybody like to play in the mud? Yeah, all right. So that can be what it looks like right here. Not that you kids would go out and do that, but maybe someday, right? You want to make sure you're in a place that's you're not going to get hurt. Other questions? All right. Well, we'll be around for a little bit, and I'd like to, maybe I can pray for us, and we can close, okay? Sound good? All right, let's pray. God, I thank you so much for this opportunity to come and to hear about a different kind of missionary work. God, I thank you for these students and these parents that are here to learn. God, they just have a heart to hear and to understand. And so, God, I pray that you would continue to guide and direct them on the path that you have for their lives. And God, I pray that you would just encourage them, God, that there's so many different ways that you can use them. And so even if it's walking across the street and talking to their neighbors, talking to their friends, and sharing your light and your hope and your gospel. So God, I pray that you would protect each one. God, I pray that you would, Lord, encourage them on their path, and that you would give them the strength and the knowledge and the understanding that they need as they continue to learn more about you, more about your creation, this world that you've put us in. God, I pray for our team that is busy right now getting things ready for Hurricane Ian response in Florida. God, I pray your protection over them. And God, I pray that you would give us so many opportunities to bring hope to the families that have lost so much. God, thank you for this day, and thank you for this opportunity to come together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.